want answers.
I want the truth.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Realize Real Lies podcast. I'm your host, Georgina Grace, and hopefully that dog of mine doesn't squeak on toys the entire time. Today, I have such a gift for you all. We have the incredible Jaymee Jay with us today, and Jaymee is a ruling 22-4, which I was so excited when I saw that this was your ruling number because I was like, yes. Another alien like me. But, the 22-4 is a master number, and this is such a significant and powerful number. It's the two energies on their own are like these people vibrate at the highest frequency of absolute unconditional pure love. And that is kind of the basis of everything that they do. And their belief is that everybody deserves to be loved and to have love, and all it's just love is everything that they are. And when you double that, it's it's even more potent. So this energy can it can be a little bit of a quite a sensitive kind of energy because it is very it's sorry, I was distracted because this dog
my dog's being the right now too.
We are going to do our best to stay focused with crazy dogs in the background. But yeah, this energy their senses are very, very heightened. So if you've ever felt like easily overstimulated or sensitive to what's this called? Materials and sound and seeing and all of this stuff, this is why. And I know you've also got a lot more master numbers in your chart, so this would be like skyrocket through the roof. But the two energy, if you think about it, we haven't had twos, this energy on Earth for a really long time. We've been under the 1000s for 1,000 years, and then before that it was 900, 800, 700, like that. And so the twos, we haven't had that. We haven't been under a two energy in a very, very long time. So now that we're in the 2020s and the twos represent this high level, pure, unconditional, infinite love. It's like a love that is not from here, that this 22-4 energy is bringing, and so as we entered in the 2000s, I wouldn't be surprised if you started to feel a pull to kind of step up and speak out and, bring this love forward. And so it probably would have started off being like, oh, I'm seeing everything that is absolutely not a representative of this love. What do I do about this? And equally, this is a very grounded energy as well, very work hard, loyal energy. That's the 4. So you're a 22-4, and the 4 energy is like, you think about anything in life that has four legs, 4 wheels. This is loyal, this is stable, this is reliable, this is dependable. This is, I'm going to say, do this. I'm there, I show up. And such a powerful combination, particularly when you bring in the fact that what you have dedicated your life to. So I wanted to introduce you with that ruling number because I love introducing my guests with their ruling numbers because it humanizes people, I think, because when we attach all the labels and all of these things, we can feel a sense of intimidation of like, oh, this person's this and that and da da da. But I think the ruling number just we can all relate, if that makes sense. So thank you so much, Jaymee, for being here. I'm really, really excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation. And yes, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I actually haven't been doing podcasting for a while, so I was like, oh, I better, dust off the cobwebs and get on here again. Because I've actually taken a break, and I've just been actually taking a break from everything and doing landscaping right now, which is like really physical, hands in the dirt, like building things, planting flowers. And it's just honestly been the best thing I could have ever
Oh,
done right now because I'm normally just in my head and in books and, dealing with really heavy stuff and really intellectual stuff. And,
mm,
just deciding to just kind of put everything aside and like just really get my hands dirty and just get really physical and just actually creating something with the earth really beautiful and like working so hard where I'm just, starving and exhausted after. And, I'm sleeping like a baby and I'm just eating whatever I want and still losing weight. It's like, it's been really, really therapeutic for me to do. So
mm.
that's kind of what I've been doing right now. And then I'm, of course, I'll get back at it. I've got a whole stack of books that I ordered that of course, I'll just dig into that at some point. But yeah, I think for the summer, I'm just really going to take a break from everything, which I'm not always, it's not always easy for me to do that. Like I tend to be like really just always, pushing myself mentally and stuff. And it's been really nice for me to take a break. And in the way that you described those numbers, that's totally me. Like I'm a very, very sensitive person to the fact where it's like just pretty much traumatic to even be like around anything, like every sound, every color, every person, like it's just like really overwhelming all the time. And so that's something that I've constantly had to deal with, which is like a gift, but it's also really traumatizing in a lot of ways because you have to spend your whole life kind of, protecting yourself from just being so open to like always being affected so much by everything in the environment, like including sound, like extreme sound sensitivity.
Mm.
Really, every color, like I feel like I feel colors, like I really like, I actually, it's hard to describe, like I'm sure you understand, but
Mhm.
just actual physical things like in the four structure, just really feeling everything physical is like I feel it on an emotional level. And so that can be a good thing or a bad thing because yeah, it's like I have a really hard time finding a place that I can live in peace. I was living in a city and I couldn't handle that because there's so much sound sensitivity and just even the geopathic stress of traffic and stuff was just really like just burning me out, my adrenals. So I moved to the country and now I've got people on ATV bikes riding up and down the street. And I'm like, no, like now where can I go where it's just
Mm.
quiet? It's hard to find.
Mm. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that you've taken time out to go and just be outside in nature and dig in the ground and get your hands dirty. That is so, so, so therapeutic. It really, really is. And the sensory, like it just, you can't help but connect and ground, and you're just right there in that moment. And I think that's with what you spend your life doing, I think that is very important that you definitely take this time because, I mean, it's such a big mission. It's such a big mission, and there's always something to do. There's always more. There's always demands with it. And so, you know, you can't help anybody if you're completely burnt out and stressed out and overstimulated and all of the things. So I'm really glad that you've been taking that time. And I really appreciate you interrupting that little break that you're having to have this conversation.
Yeah, and the thing with like just working with trauma all the time stuff is like you don't actually get to see the fruits of your labor, or like you don't always know the effect you have, or like you just do it based on principle. Like I always tell people, don't go into like any type of counseling or anything because it's not the same as sales where you're going to get a bonus or you're going to make your quotas, or you just do things and you separate from the outcome. Like you do them just because they need to be done and that the right thing to do, and you hope it has impact, and you continually do things, but you'd never like, I mean, sometimes you get the feedback, but it's not like cause and effect, right? So a lot of stuff you do, you don't know, you're not getting a payoff. And so that can kind of start to grind somebody down after a while because you're not really getting those little dopamine hits that you would get in some other types of occupations. And so, yeah, doing like a landscaping job is stuff like we actually get to see, like, oh, I built that rock wall, or those flowers are blooming, or the house is painted, or, it's really such a different feeling to be able to actually really see the effect of work. And that's just something I've always thought was, one of the hardest parts about like working with people is that you're really, if you're in it for a payoff, like you just go into something completely different, where you can see the numbers adding up,
Mm, such a good point because yeah, it can be yeah. And it's all like particularly working with trauma as well. I think it's the experience is like, two steps forward, five steps back, and then two steps forward, another five back. And it's like that. And so it's constantly needing to dig deeper and deeper every single time. Um, so just on that, you're a counselor by trade, right? And so this is what you do for a living, but you've just decided to also add a
I actually have a really, yeah, I actually have a really broad background. Like every time I apply for a job, people are like, this is your resume because it's like so many things that are completely unrelated. And like, it's like, I just can never kind of pick one thing and stay on a track. Like I'm kind of just a real generalist that's been all over the place. I've had all different types of jobs. And yeah, so a lot of the actual counseling that I do, like I've done it through like nonprofit organizations and through like the healthcare system and social services and stuff. But then I also like most of the stuff I do is for free. Like anything that I've done with SRA survivors and stuff like that, that's all been just like ministry and free. And it's never been something that I've charged for or asked for money for. And so, yeah, like I sort of I have other things that I do at the same time as well. So, and that's just kind of how I'm doing it for now. Yeah.
No wonder you need a break because that is busy.
Yeah, I'm a really busy person for sure. And, you know, to be honest, like I spend a lot of time reading, which is like, it's a huge time commitment. And it's something that I know like a lot of people want to read and they have kids and stuff and they just don't have, like, they're not able to actually take in the amount of information that I spend like a big chunk of my time actually just taking in information. Like it's just reading's not fast. You know, I think I'm a pretty fast reader. I'm trying to work more on speed reading, but like it takes time actually to take in all of this information. And when it comes to working with survivors of SRA and stuff, like a lot of them have written books and stuff. And so I try to read everybody's book. I try to take in all the stories. I try to listen to everything like that everybody's saying and sharing and kind of just be almost like a place where all of that's kind of going into one spot and sort of integrating it together. And I feel that is kind of part of what I'm supposed to do just because I can, and I have a really high ability to retain things that I read and remember them and stuff. And I really like reading. So
Mm.
I do feel like that's something that I need to do, but yeah, it's a big time commitment. Just even taking in all the information in books.
And I think that's so like for the survivors that have written these books, like that is everything for them. You know, it takes a lot to speak out and to share your truth and to share what you've been through and to know that someone is actually dedicating their time, dedicating their life to sit and read and not just read, but like really digest and process and take it in and, you know, yeah, make sense of everything. And so I'd really love to talk about that because this is such a big thing that's a part of your life, you know. And so when and how did you start on this journey of learning about SRA? Because it's, yeah, you can understand that pedophilia is a thing in the world, but then the jump from pedophilia and all of that kind of abuse to satanic ritual abuse and MK Ultra and all of this stuff, like how and when and yeah.
I think it is a calling. And like when I look back in hindsight, I can definitely see how the universe was like giving me little tiny bits and pieces in a certain level, in a certain amount at a certain time, kind of preparing me for the worst of the worst. Like I don't think I just jumped there or was, born for that. Like I
Mm.
definitely went through a series of things where like, I was introduced to different concepts a little bit at a time. And then I think when I really started to understand it would be about, I guess, around 2008, 2010. I just had a lot of like stuff happen in my life that really was kind of like activating my consciousness. And then that's kind of when the universe like presented to me the kind of full picture. And that's kind of when I was like ready to actually understand it because a lot of this stuff, I still struggle. And I do feel like part of my mission is also to explain it to other people, which I do feel like I'm pretty good at. And I've kind of developed a way of explaining it because if you just start from here, it's too much for people.
Mm.
And it sounds really sci-fi. Like it's not, you can't, if you just start talking about this stuff, you actually kind of sound crazy and people just think you're, like kind of way out there. But there's kind of like a way of explaining it where you sort of start with some base concepts. And so, yeah, I think to be ready to fully comprehend it, I think that was around 2010 when I really started to actually understand really. And I just when I really started to understand it, I knew it was the most important thing. Like, it's definitely the way that evil is coming into this dimension. It's through a back door. It's through the consciousness of traumatized children and through splitting of consciousness before somebody has a chance to develop a will to resist the splitting of consciousness. So to me, it's really the key to everything. It's really the way that this non-human energy is coming into this dimension through a back door and acting through innocence that is not aware of it. And I keep trying to stress the point of it to people, because I think people, like, there's a lot of waking up going on the planet and people kind of are seeing the surface. But to me, satanic ritual abuse is the most important thing, like, in all of history, in all time. And it's like, to me, it's the key to everything.
I think you're 100% accurate. And this is why, like, part of the reason why I had to start a podcast was, one, for my own healing, for my own ability to regain my own voice and speak out after the abuse that I experienced. But also, if I'm going to start a podcast and I'm not talking about this, then there's no point starting a podcast. There's no point having a platform and having a voice and talking about truth and all of this kind of stuff if you're not dealing with this, because this, like you said, it's the epicenter of everything, isn't it? And it's horrific and it's hard to hear. And I totally can understand why people are like, oh, you're crazy, or that sounds like sci-fi, because they're human, and human beings could not comprehend these kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love to give you an opportunity to share how you explain it to people, if you're happy to do that. And because I think that would be, I've had some survivors on the podcast and sharing their experience, but I think it would make such a difference, even for myself, to kind of hear the layering and an easy way to comprehend so that it actually does make sense. And yeah, so anyway, I'll stop talking. And
Yeah. I think that people are starting to wake up to some of the horrors, and I think they're starting to acknowledge the reality of these things. But I think some of the lack of knowledge right now is really in understanding the motivation and why. Like, for example, sometimes, I talk to people about the Catholic Church and stuff, and, because for a long time there was such a resistance to people believing that, an organization supposedly with a mask of, spirituality and goodness is like perpetuating evil on children. And it took so many people coming forward for so long until a threshold was hit, until it was undeniable. And then once that floodgate broke through, there was even more people coming through. So it was just so obviously not just a few isolated incidences, but a structural, part of a system. And still people think, oh, it's because priests don't marry, or, it's just, they have these ridiculous reasons for thinking why this would be happening on a systemic and like industrialized level of child abuse. And what they don't understand is why they're doing it, And so, like, if you understand that pedophilia is mind control, it's a form of mind control. It's a form of soul abduction, and it's a form of emotional, manipulation. And the way that it affects a child is like the worst thing you could ever do to a child. But then the way that it unfolds afterwards doesn't make sense to people that aren't trained in trauma. So like, they would say, oh, well, how come somebody that was abused would become promiscuous or would bond with their abuser, or like all these things that on the surface seem like the opposite of what would actually happen. But a lot of psychology is the opposite on the surface of, what we would kind of assume, right? So that's what makes it so hard to believe, because you're like, well, why wouldn't these people tell? Or why wouldn't these people, they seem to act the exact opposite of what we would assume they would act under the same circumstances. But that's just not the way humans are. These people understand psychology. They know exactly how to do it, and they know the exact outcome. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the churches. Like, there's multiple groups that have been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. But it's really important to understand that it's not about sexuality or even perversion. It's really about using those things as a form of molding a child's psyche as it's forming into a programmable slave, is really what it is. And so stuff like that, I do tend to try to get people to understand, because it's not just like on the surface, people think, oh, there's just kind of these groups of people that enjoy doing things, and they do. Some of them, they do enjoy it, but there's definitely a MO, and there's an agenda, and It's very strategic for a very specific outcome of why they do it. And
Mm.
a lot of these evil people, I kind of think of them as cyborgs because they kind of operate from a cybernetic worldview, right? So to them, the feedback is their God, right? Like they're amoral. They don't actually operate from principles, because a lot of times when you operate from principles, it seems irrational on the surface, right? Like the principle's higher than necessarily the outcome or the feedback, especially because we live in an inverted world. So people that are Satanists are really very rational. They're pretty much like outcome based. It's not about the idea, it's about the actual outcome, like the means to an end, right? So to them, like a lot of us, we act in accordance with principles regardless of the outcome because we understand the principle, right? And that's like a very virtuous thing to do. Whereas people that are extremely scientific and strategic, like to them, the feedback is the answer, right? So if they do something and they don't get struck by lightning, they think it's okay to do it. Or if they do something and there's a certain outcome, then they do it. Like it's very logical and rational. It's like where somebody like me or you would say, well, yeah, I know I could do that, but I also wouldn't because I understand a principle of right and wrong, right? But to
Mhm.
them, that doesn't exist. And so you see this kind of Nietzschean philosophy where they're like above good and evil, right? Because they think those are just constructs. And so to them, they're just like almost like a cybernetic feedback loop where they just do things and experiment on things, kind of almost like AI machine learning. And whatever the outcome they want, they just do whatever it takes. And they think that that kind of is the God that they worship. Is, well, if it's getting the result, then it must be part of nature, right? That's kind of how they look at it. So when they go in and they abuse kids and stuff and they get the specific outcome, to them that's allowed and that's okay and that's good because it worked. And they think that the fact that it does work means it's part of nature and that it's inherently part of the system we're in, and that there's not like anything going against that would be just a social construct to them.
Mm. As you're sharing that, I'm like my brain is going to the celebrities that, have quote unquote signed their soul away. And that's exactly what they're doing. It's all about the outcome. It's not about the principles of
Mhm.
humanity or the greater good or like just any principles whatsoever. It is, no, I'm signing my name here because I want the outcome of being really rich, really famous, blah, 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 whatever. And so whatever I have to do to get that, I'll do. And yeah, that's a real shame. But okay, so and also as you like I can't help but go back to my own experiences, and it's totally 100% the case. The memories that I have are not like I feel like I'm still recovering all the memories, but there's definitely like my dad was a psychopath and he would do things and get off on the power that came from what he did. Obviously, he also enjoyed doing what he did, but I think it was really the power of that. And it was definitely a form of mind control because I was under that control for a lot of my life, even after the abuse stopped, thinking that I was still a victim and that I can't speak and I can't do this and I can't do that. He would say those things to me that, if I spoke, he would have to use a gun on my mom and all of this kind of programming and horrible stuff. But yeah, absolutely 100%. And so, okay, so the motive is to control, to program.
Well, it's to make another person and their consciousness, which you could call their soul or their consciousness, like it's to make them an extension of your will. So like the reason to make a slave is to exploit and to extend your own will beyond yourself, right? And so we kind of see this even like with corporations and managers, and like it's like the higher up you are in a pyramid, the less you're actually doing work and the more you're just funneling up everybody else's labor. And so it is that pyramid structure. So the people that want to create slaves, it's to make their will larger through other people, because we all only have our own agency over ourselves unless you can make another being an extension of your will. And that's really how they get power in this dimension, is to make other people conduit for their will. um and something I was just thinking about lately is, like a lot of these Crowleyan magicians and stuff, like they'll say, oh, it's love under will and love under will. And when I used to hear that, I used to think, oh, they're harnessing their own love under their own will, which would make sense from an occult perspective that you would want to do that, right? Like to harness your emotional life force of love under your will, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's occurred to me that that's not what it actually means. What it actually means is your love under their will, right? And so if you really think about what that means, because most people that become slaves and are used as a conduit for another person's will are acting out of love. And so you see this like with a lot of the wokeism and stuff, where like the people's heart is really like so harnessed into these agendas that their mind is bypassing the actual logical side. Like it's really that heart energy that somebody else has given an idea and then they're acting their love under another person's will. And what you just talked about with your dad and a lot of the attachment disorders and Stockholm syndrome and stuff like that, the
Mm.
manipulation of attachment disorders. So like whenever these, people are abusing kids, it's like, oh, you're daddy's little girl, you're a good girl. And it's really that harnessing of the person's love that is the most powerful thing you could ever use to manipulate somebody. And actually, I just read Svali's latest book, which people really got to read her stuff. Like it's just so good. She's done an amazing job. And this is her latest book, Never Give Up. But she really, really talks a lot in here, amongst other things. It's an amazing book all around, but there's really a lot in here about attachment disorders and the way that the people who were abusing her were like really manipulating her need to bond and her need to please and all these things. And so when you look at this industrialized pedophilia, it's like that's what they're really doing, is traumatizing the child, and then the child's like begging for their approval and to be accepted. And it's a way deeper level of abuse, but it's really the love, right? It's really the love that's exploited, and that's really their most powerful thing.
Mm. You just explained my whole life.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing to overcome, right? Because
Mm.
it's like you have to actually separate from your innate like ability to like forgive and love and all these amazing qualities that you have as a beautiful little girl. Those are actually used against you and harnessed for you, like where you're trying to like forgive abusers and stuff in order to bond. And like it's really so difficult to like rise above that because it goes against your nature to be loving, and you have to kind of like, it's quite difficult. That really is one of the hardest things, is to overcome that trauma bonding. And it's their most powerful tool. It really, really is. And that's why they're doing the pedophilia. That's exactly, I mean, there's other parts too, but that's really the main part of it.
Mm. Wow, I just need to let that sink in because that is so, when I say you explained my whole life, you literally explained my whole life. And there's the abuse that happened with my dad, but then also with my mum as well. And so that's literally what I'm working on right now, is this trauma bond that I have with my mum, and far out. Yeah, 100%. It is overcoming that attachment of trauma.
And realizing how it was used against you, like how like, and you see this with all abusers, right? Like it's like
Mm.
whether it's like in a relationship or a job or the government, or like
Mm.
they're always kind of manipulating your a need for like approval and acceptance and to bond and to be in a relationship. And they're really exploiting the best parts of you, which is to be forgiving and like all these things that like, I feel like every little girl is just born with that, you know, just unconditional forgiveness and love and putting their father on a pedestal. And it's like that's really it's so hard to really step back and see that that's exactly what they were manipulating in you. And then how your own mind, because you want so badly
Mm.
to be daddy's little girl,
Mm.
that is really what stopped you from like speaking the truth, asserting your rights, like there's all these things. And so it's really like um it really is the love, you know what I mean? It really is the love that they've tapped into. And it's really hard to separate yourself from it and see really how much that was exploited. And I don't believe any of this would be possible without exploiting that, you know?
100%, because it's a child's love is so, so pure, isn't it? It is so unconditionally pure, like you said. And yeah, exploiting that under their will. That is so, so powerful what you said. I think a lot of people are going to like, have these huge, big realization moments. So So that is like, and okay, so then we have the pedophilia level of like, this is what they're doing, but then they don't stop there, right? It goes further. Can, yeah, can you explain
Yeah, so I mean,
that?
to really understand satanic ritual abuse is only one part of a bigger, I mean, that's just kind of a theme that's used for trauma because it's kind of universal and like those things are going to traumatize anybody, especially children, and it's just a tried and true way to terrify people, the satanic themes of things. Whether people are religious or not, it's all people are little kids are going to be scared of anything to do with satanic stuff. So it's like, just no matter, even people that, some of them who do it believe in it and some of them don't, but they'll use it either way because it works. And it's some people just have a hard time with that, but it's like, so there's kind of different levels to programming. The satanic part of it is really just more of a theme for rituals. And then there's, of course, just like physical torture, which, just has a physiological effect on the body and also the mind, like just the amnesia, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think, that's also another place that I really start with people, because I work with lots of counselors and therapists and they think this stuff is like just, conspiracy theory, or, you know what I mean? Like, and it just blows my mind, like that people could be so educated and have a hard time believing this. So one of the ways I start to convince them is just really to like talk about PTSD and how that affects memory and how it affects the mind and where things get stored in the mind. And then you can take that to another level of, okay, so like then there's a compartment, and why couldn't that compartment, be programmed? And, and then so people start to be able to understand that, if you really start to just study some basic stuff about memory and PTSD, which is easy to find out, right, with the internet. And then, so there's that part of just torture, right? Like torture has been really well researched. There's the Kubark manual that the Nazis did extensive torture of all kinds and really made it scientific, right? Like they have the exact voltage, the exact amount of everything you can do for how long to drown somebody. Like they have that all down to a complete scientific method. So that's just really physiological stuff. And then the other part of generational programming is just emotional abuse and spiritual abuse. So what they basically do, and with the developmental stages of a child, so they basically try to invert every part of the natural order of things during the developmental stages of a child's life so that that child has no chance to actually develop normally. So not only is their brain prevented from forming normally with neural pathways that would be integrated, they're formed basically into like different tree branches. And so it's not like it's a tree and then it's separated. It's like it's actually formed separate through the trauma during the developmental stages. And then also what they do, because at each stage of development, and you can look up like Erik Erikson stages of development and stuff, like really basic psychology. Anybody with a basic understanding of psychology of like operant conditioning, classical conditioning, developmental stages of childhood, like it's really, really basic stuff they exploit. And they've been able to do this for a long time because they know how a child develops and they know what their main needs are at each age, right? And so they also do a bunch of psychodramas, which are basically scenarios that they'll set up so that the child concludes a false belief within themselves, which we all have in our life anyways. These ones are just constructed very deliberately for a very specific belief to be arrived at. And then that gets internalized by the child, and then that forms their worldview. And then that's how they have that child's mind under their will to create basically an army of people that have their programmed worldview in and are going to create it out of their own subconscious that's driving them without their conscious knowledge. And so that's really why the world's so messed up, right? Because we can deal with the stuff on the surface all the time. You can have all the prisons in the world, you can have all the social workers in the world, you can have all the counselors, all the all these things on society's surface trying to deal with social problems. And like I said before, we've never had so many laws and so many rules and so many agencies, and we're in complete chaos. Everybody's messed up. Everybody has mental health issues. Like society's just gone like completely chaotic. There's more crime than ever. There's more abuse than ever. And so none of these things that we've attempted to do on the surface have actually solved any of the problems, because all this SRA stuff is beneath the surface, and it's
Mhm.
beneath consciousness, and it's driving. And it doesn't matter how many things you do on the surface, it's not going to change what's been programmed in little children's mind that they aren't even able to access themselves.
And all of these organizations on the surface, like, the counseling and the schooling and prisons and the hospitals and all of these things, there are a lot of people that go in with really good intentions, with, their heart set on really making a difference, except all of these organizations that I just all mentioned, they're all set up and designed by these Satanists, basically. So then all of those people, not all of them, I'm sure there are some really amazing people still operating inside of those systems, but they are exactly as you said, like their love is under their will in those organizations. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They need the altruistic person right out of university that wants to save the world. And then they go work for these organizations and they're like, oh, yeah, we got that person doing all, they just really believe they're saving the world, but really they're just funneling everything up to, it's exactly what you're describing. That's a really good description.
mm, far out. And they're literally have just created all of these people think that they're really, really making a difference,
Mm-hmm.
but they're just distracted from what's actually.
Yeah, and that was me. Like that was me. I was just the most altruistic person, like biggest heart, just wanted to help everybody. And I worked for so many organizations, and it took me so long to truly understand how evil they really were, and like how narcissistic and psychopathic these, well, they're called communal narcissists, right? Like where they love being seen as like, oh, we're saving the homeless, or we're, all these agencies, they just are always, kind of putting on this show of being these humanitarians. And then you really start to look at like, they're exploiting all the people at the bottom. They got all the little heart workers at the bottom that are just working for low wage, and they don't care. They're volunteering. They got all these volunteers and all these people working from their heart for nothing. And then it's basically like a money laundering where they're just getting all this money. It's all going to these psychopathic managers at the top who have like free labor at the bottom to, and yeah, I worked in that too. And it took me a long time to figure it out, like, because my love was under their will, just thinking, oh, well, I'm helping, I'm doing this. And I really, it took me a long time of working in these organizations before I could see through like just how it was just a complete sham, and actually working for the inverse of what the people at the bottom are trying to do. And it interferes with the natural homeostasis of society, because a lot of these people would riot at some point, right? Like, I mean, with the homelessness and the poverty and the drugs and the fentanyl and like, there's all these social problems, even the prison industry and stuff. And people would be rioting, or like, the levee would break, right? And so they have kind of social workers and counselors coming in, kind of pacifying and band-aiding, and here's a little food hamper, and here's some free whatever stuff for your baby, or what I mean, like these kind of little pacifying things that actually just help keep the structure of oppression and exploitation in place, because you're kind of getting the drops of water coming through the bucket. And it's and then of course they just these little heart workers at the bottom, which I was right there, just happy to do it, right, thinking they're helping, patching all the holes. And then you get a little bit older, you say, wait a second, like, what am I patching here? Like, why do we even have this bucket? Like,
It's such a clever system, because you have those heart workers at the bottom and they're constantly basically just chasing their tail, going around and around, and then they become exhausted, depleted, overworked, depressed, all of this stuff. So then they have to then become a consumer of that very system that they're.
absolutely. You wouldn't believe how many people I work with that are on medication themselves. Like I found it just absolutely surprising. Like, even in the people that I took counseling training with, like most of them were on antidepressants. And I just thought, like, how are we setting examples for other people? And I'm not, everybody can make their own choice about medication. I'm not giving anybody advice on that, but it's just that, like, I just found it really interesting, like how sick so many people were, sick the healers were, right? Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like, they haven't really overcome it themselves, but then they're trying to be an example for other people. And it's like, a lot of the people in the field, I really was like, I don't know if these are the best people because, and not to judge, but it's like, you haven't actually overcome it yourself. So
Mm,
I don't think you can help other people, until you can at least get to a level yourself, which
mm,
everybody's in a process, and that's okay. I don't think people have to be perfect either. And I think unless somebody's had trauma, they're probably not going to be a good counselor. Like I've went to school with people who had a really easy life, lived with their parents till they were 25, had their university paid for. Everything they learned about trauma was from a textbook, and they are just totally disconnected. They have no experiential knowledge of trauma, and they're going in and kind of just, doing what they've been trained to do. And a lot of the clients just cannot relate to that. They can sense the social working of them and the use of words and how they're kind of just like read it from a textbook, and it just doesn't work. Like people
mm.
want to know that you've tasted a bit of pain before they're going to take your advice on anything, right? So there is something to be said about, the wounded healer. But yeah, if somebody's just pacifying or, anesthetizing themselves or like in addiction themselves. I've even had coworkers like overdose on drugs, like working in addiction centers, like just shocking. Like you come to work and you're like, oh, our coworker was secretly using drugs even though we're working in a drug rehab. Like it's that crazy, you
Mm.
know.
Far out. And I think that also points to the programming and the indoctrination in the educational system, because the whole idea is you work really hard in our facilities essentially, and you are really good at remembering things, you pass the test, and then you get this piece of paper, and that says now you're equipped to help other people that have actually gone through real life things that are not things that you can explain in from textbooks or anything like this, but you've got this piece of paper, and but then society will are trained also to only trust those people with that piece of paper.
Mhm.
And then so it's just they've really spent a long time planning this out very tediously, and
Mhm.
how the different things far out. And so yeah, that's absolutely nuts. And I can just see how it all now plays out. It's every system, isn't it? Every system.
It is every system. And yeah, I really encourage people to like just seek out like alternative healers and stuff and do your homework, because we're just so conditioned to look at somebody's credentials or look at their, even if you go look for a chiropractor or something right now, it looks like a dating profile on their page for being a practitioner. Like, you know what I mean? Like people just, it's such a, everybody just has this total fake persona they put forward, and like I can say, because I've worked behind the scenes, like in a lot of these facilities, and really seen the incompetency and stuff of people where like, even at the hospital, like if you even knew, you would never go to a hospital. Like honestly, if you saw like literally how incompetent people were like with medical stuff, like you would be terrified if you really saw, but there's just this kind of projection of like, oh, there are these super ultra professionals because they're wearing a white jacket or something. And it's like, just really a lot of projection going on there, because like they're just humans, and there's a lot of human error everywhere. And I just said it's the same as people like trying to do online dating or something. Like, yeah, the profile always looks good, and like even if you're looking for a counselor, you can go on these websites and there's like, oh, they all look so together and wonderful. And like I know people in real life that if you looked at their profile, you would think, oh, this person just has it together. They have a perfect marriage and a perfect kids, and they're
Mm.
just, you just want to get counseling from them, and I'm like, this girl's like banging her husband's friends, like I know it for a fact because I know her, like and I'm looking at this profile thinking, oh my goodness, like it's such a persona, like.
Mm. Oh man. And yeah, it's such a shame because yeah, far out. It's just, I mean, I feel for that person because it's how they've been taught to go through life. And that's what, that's kind of the standard practice now. And it's kind of
Mhm.
accepted to a certain extent. And this is the thing, like people don't want to go beyond the surface, because if they go beyond the surface, they have to go beyond their own surface. And, the fact that you worked in that system and you were one of those heart workers, but then you actually allowed yourself to come out and look at it from a bird's eye view and just get yourself that speaks volumes about who you are and your spirit and the whole reason why you're here. Um, but I would love to maybe dissect a little bit some of the agendas that have been played out over the last few years and kind of like how they, yeah, the MO that is like, because I know if you explain one agenda, it's like, and that is literally, you know, how they're doing every single other agenda. And yeah, so
Mhm.
because there are
Yeah,
many
sure.
agendas being pushed at the moment, or for a while.
To me, it's a really simple way of looking at everything is freedom and slavery. It's really the force of evil wants slavery, it wants automation, it wants a hierarchy, it wants control, and it wants oppression. And freedom is chaotic and organic and can't be contained, and you can't control the outcome, and things have to be, there is no power structure. It's, power can change. And so, and that's really the nature of God, right? Is love and freedom and free will and things organically, life evolving and creativity and stuff, all these things that can't be controlled and contained. And so to me, I really look at those are the two agendas, right? And so when they say love under will, that's really, and the SRA really harnessing like children and children's love and attachment disorders. And that's why it's so evil, because this evil force of power and control and hierarchy and structure is actually harnessing the love energy and the innocence and all these godly qualities of children to invert through it. And so that's really, if you really look at everything, that's what it comes down to.
Mm.
And being a quote unquote good person who always projected good onto other people and never understood their behavior, to me, one of the most powerful things I've ever learned is that there's certain people on the planet that look at everything as right and wrong, and that's how they make decisions. Like, I was born that way. When I was little, I would think, is that fair? Is that right? Is that true? Like, those are things that would go in my mind naturally. I'm not even taking credit for it. I was honestly just born that way. And then having to meet predators in my life and really get sucked into them on multiple levels, it's because I could never understand their behavior. And so there's a really another simple way to look at things is like, there's certain people that look at things in terms of right and wrong. Like, we understand we're in a matrix by a creator and there's rules. And so a good person is somebody who's trying to understand the rules so that they can get aligned with it, right? So you're wondering, should I do that? Is that okay? Is that fair? Is that right? Is that true? Because you want to be part of creation and the creator.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other people that it's all about power and control, right? And so they're not thinking right and wrong. And so, oh my gosh, this has helped me so much, because even if you go to like the court system or the police or, these organizations, you're like, why are they doing this? Like, it doesn't make sense. It would make sense to just do it this way. And you can never understand their behavior until you put on the power and control lens. And then you're like, oh, it was never about the truth or right or wrong. They just wanted power and control over the situation. Because if you go to the same table and you're like, well, here's the facts and here's the truth and here's a fair solution. And then they're like, oh, well, we're going to have to like do this paperwork or that. And it makes no sense. You're like, oh, it's because we're not even playing the same game. And that's why you can't understand what they're doing. It makes no sense.
So everything is about power and control. And that makes sense, exactly as you said. You cannot, and I think this is a lot like why people can't comprehend, like, why would they want to do something like that? That doesn't make sense, Why are you, having these crazy ideas or conspiracies or theories or whatever you want to call it? Yeah, no, we can't make it make sense because we are living in a world where we would do what is right, what is fair to the next person.
Yes.
But they
know that we're projecting that onto them, right? So we see this even with the stuff that happened during COVID. There's all these people saying, oh, well, of course the medical staff is there to protect you. And of course these mandates are for everybody's protection. Of course we care about our neighbors. And so all your love is being harnessed under their will. And nobody can go against that programming that like, perhaps there's a power and control game here, which to a lot of people is quite obvious, the level of power and control they attempted to see, what the reaction would be, just like a cybernetic, like, I'm not sure if people know what I mean by cybernetics, but if you look at like systems theory and cybernetics, it's basically like inserting something into a system and then getting the feedback, and it affects the whole system. And people can kind of look that up and research it themselves, because it'll help a lot of things make sense of what's happening right now, like on a societal level. Because
Mm.
a lot of these organizations have had power and control underground for a long time. They really want to come out publicly and have public power and control. That's really what the game is at this point, is to come out publicly and just like, they really actually want to be worshipped openly, and they want to be who they are openly. They want to be able to be open pedophiles, open Satanists, and openly have a power and control hierarchy where they're not pretending that we're free anymore. Although there's been these factors going on for a long time in history, there's been this kind of veneer of freedom and democracy, and that we're here to help. And they're really playing the game like a sociopath, or like that pedophile abuser that's like a Boy Scout leader or something, right? Like
Mm.
pretending they're the nice guy, right? That's kind of
Mm.
what our government's been doing for quite a while. But that's kind of started to end over the last couple of years, where they're like, you will muzzle yourself, you will take force injections into your body, you will stay in your, like, these kind of there's no process to making up these arbitrary mandates. Which slavery, there is no process. It's whatever the slave master wants arbitrarily. It's just done just because he's the master and you're the slave. And so it's not the same game being played anymore. And I think a lot of people started to wake up and really see through the stuff, but then you see there's a whole other group of people that just went deeper into denial. But I mean, if you put on the power control glasses, it's so obvious that that was really being done was a social experiment to see the cybernetic feedback of, if we inject this much of the power over people, like what's the kickback going to be? How are people going to react, right? And
Mm.
now they're just going to study it all, and they're just regrouping. They're just regrouping to see what their next little text move will be.
Mm. Oh, far out. And you just explained so many agendas in that one example, like the
The
trans
agenda is
one,
slavery. It's slavery. It's
the
really simple.
agenda.
That is
Yeah.
the agenda.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like the transgender agenda, like that is for me, that is like one of the most terrifying agendas. Not in like I'm
Yeah.
terrified, but like how far people will go, like to subject their own children into this thing. Like that is so much love under their will.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because if you don't transition a child, they might grow up and kill themselves. So really, if you don't mutilate a child's genitals, you're a murderer, right? Like, this is how inverted people's thinking has been by experts, that they literally can't even use their own discretion and discernment to call BS on the most ridiculous idea ever being presented to them. Like, it's like they just internalize whatever's given to them, and it's like it's that ridiculous at this point. And
Yeah.
if that, I don't know where people's line is, because for me the line's always been kids. Like, if
Yeah.
people want to join a bike gang or live a gangster life, or you know what I mean, to each their own. Hey, you want to go play that game? Like, that's your life, right? Like, do what you want. But when it starts to involve kids, it's like now it's everybody's problem, and that's against the rules, and you've crossed the line, right? Like, it's not about you, it's not about your lifestyle, it's not about other people playing the same game, it's not about people having free will. So for me, if anybody's line is not children, like I always say, you're already dead. Like, you are already dead. If you don't care about child abuse, if you don't care about pedophilia, if you don't care about mutilating children, if you don't care about this industrialized level of child abuse, then you are already spiritually absolutely dead. Like, if that's not the line for anybody,
Yeah.
there is no line. Like, you're already dead if that's not your line, in my opinion.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I love how just blunt you put that, because it's true. It's really true. And there are a lot of people, like you said, who are acting out of love, but under their will, that think that they're actually doing a really good thing for the child. And that is the inversion within itself. So a lot of people will come back to you and say, no, but I do care about children. I do care about all of this stuff. It's abusive to not respect their identity wishes or da 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 da, whatever it is. But that is the inversion, because
Yeah.
exactly what you were explaining before about the fragmentation of the development of the child's brain, we're introducing where essentially like children are, my gosh, my brain is like going into overload, but they're introducing pedophilia and sexual everything from a very young age now, and that's essentially child abuse, right? Like you're a kid, you're not meant to be seeing these things. It's you don't have the developmental capacity to comprehend what is happening right now and to make a decision for yourself as to whether that is right or wrong. You are just being programmed. Like children are just they're just sponges, especially at a very, I think it's like at least before the age of 7, they're just completely being in a programmable state. And that is when they're getting them in this.
Mhm. Mhm. And it is trauma based mind control. Like there's you can't even show a picture to a child without traumatize. Like that will traumatize a child. It's outside of their realm of comprehension, and it's that's why they want it done on a mass industrialized scale, because every single person is going to be traumatized at a very young age, and trauma is about power and control.
Mm.
It's very humans are kind of like computers. Like they're not that complicated. Human beings are very much the same in their basic needs, their emotional needs, their sense of belonging, like really basic psychology,
Yeah.
right? So interfering with that in human, as soon as it's like doing martial arts, like jiu-jitsu or something, like you get them off centered and then you make your move, right? And so traumatizing everybody, even just everything about our society traumatizes kids, like everything, like even just going to school, anything, it's everybody's getting traumatized as soon as they're
Mm.
born, and that's exactly how this power and control structure stays. They have to have the trauma. They
Mm.
have to have trauma. Nobody's going along voluntarily with this stupidity because it makes no sense, right? And for a lot of people, they're like, how are people going along with absolute stupidity,
Mm.
right? Like it's like it's so obvious that evil is stupid and good is intelligent, right? Like it's obviously being evil is not going to work out in the long run. You'd have to be a moron to believe that like you're going to be a pedophile and accomplish something good in your life. Like it's like there has to be deception in order for somebody to be that deluded. And yeah, there is a little temporary payoff where you have power and control, but you made yourself into such a vile being to get that power and control that like you're never going to enjoy a normal life anyways. Like it makes no sense. There's no way in nature that this could just happen and be okay and that things are going to work out. Like it just goes against creation on every level, that like there's no way anybody could be low enough intelligence to actually think it works out. And I
Mm.
used to always wonder, because a lot of these, evil villains seem really intelligent. They have a lot of degrees. They're, mathematicians, scientific, like they have all the knowledge and all the degrees and all the libraries and all the secret information that's hidden for everybody else. And
Yeah.
it's always, kind of, I've always sat around and wondered, like, how are these people so intelligent but so ignorant, right? Like there has to be that deception, and it's only through trauma that people become deceived.
Yeah. 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 It is so powerful. It is so, so, so powerful. And it is like a computer. If you like have the motherboard and there's all of the critical aspects of this motherboard that need to be in the right positions, in the right places in order for this thing to actually operate at its optimal level. But what happens if I just take this little piece out and see it's still going to try and operate, but it's going to be at like a percentage less capacity. And then, oh, let me take more and then more and more. And so human beings, we have been operating at a very low percent capacity because of this trauma-based mind control. And it's everywhere, like this is the reason why I don't let my son watch Disney movies, because in every
Oh
Disney
no,
movie, oh my goodness, like
he'll
there's
be
not
transgender by the time he's 3 if you're not careful with those. No, seriously,
no, but
I
yeah.
would not let a kid watch that. It's
No,
no,
it is literally the worst thing. There are so many versions of Disney movies now that all of it is off the cards pretty much. And yeah, but in every Disney movie, especially the early ones like Lion King, there's always a death of a parent. And I'm
Mhm.
like, you don't need to show a kid that. They don't know the difference
Yeah.
between what's real and what's not real. And so they're being conditioned that their parents are going to die one day or their parents aren't in charge or like, no, it's so ingrained. But then there are a lot of people where you're seen as crazy Or what's wrong with you? Let them have a childhood.
I know, right? Same with like I don't know, like all these violent movies and stuff. Like, and I'm totally against censorship. Like, if people want to watch that, go ahead. But it's I I've seen one violent movie. I don't like they're all the same. I don't like it's not like I'm watching it thinking, oh, this is so wow. Like I just it's so boring to me. It's like I don't understand how all these movies are exactly the same. It's the same stuff. It's like why are people even going and what are they getting out of watching it? Because to me, I'm like, I I don't see any point in watching this. Like I don't get anything out of watching violence. Like it doesn't do anything for me. Like it's not exciting for me. It's not entertaining. It's just like dumb, you know? Like I have no desire to put it in my mind at all. Like
Yeah.
people seem to want to. And another theory that I've been kind of thinking about lately is like just I think one of the reasons why people crave evil so much is just to feel anything. And when you look at these really evil people and how they keep getting more sadistic and more perverted and more vile, it's because when you become a cyberneticist or, you know, like a cyborg type sociopath where everything's just so rational, like you literally just start cutting off your emotions in order to, you know, work in an organization that's evil because you got a check, or marry somebody for money, or, you know, like there's just all these kind of logical rational things that have a payoff, but you really cut off your humanity in order to override to be a left brain, you know, strategist and rational minded you know, psychopath, right?
Mm.
And when they do that, like, because emotions are, you can't just cut off some, right? So when you become that evil, you no longer can feel anything at all, right? Like even when like people eat, they don't feel full or they don't feel their bodies, or like they just start becoming more and more disconnected from their whole self, and
Mm.
they feel nothing. And so you see a lot of these really sadistic people, like they just need something shocking in order to just even feel alive, like because they're so deadened that, you
Mm.
know, I think that's why they're just craving, you know. And I think on even a lighter level, like people going and watching these movies and stuff just to feel something, like even just to feel grossed out, you kind of felt alive for a second, to have a visceral reaction to something, right? Like because you're just, people are so droned out now and so
Mm.
desensitized and in such a dissociative, like even if they're not completely dissociative, they are in type of like a derealization state where it's like people just kind of feel like they're living in a movie and watching stuff go by. And you know, I think it's just, it's so unnatural that I think people are looking for anything of shock value just to feel alive. And like that includes pornography and all these other things where people are just looking for something exciting, even if it's bad, you know, like even just for shock value.
Yeah. And you know, I'm listening, I'm feeling like not feeling, what am I trying to say here? When you share this, it's like, you know, if you know anything about the Satanists and what they do and their kind of rituals that they do and the things that they get off on, it is really horrific, some of the stuff that like it's gory, you know, the things that they do, particularly at these rituals and yeah, like you're right, they have to do the most extreme things, like to babies, to innocent
Mm-hmm.
animals, to really, and that makes them feel alive. But
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that, or they have done that behind closed doors, but now they're leaking it out in a very obvious and clear way through the media, through celebrities, through, you know, like different brand labels, you know, having like a mannequin, but with like a lead tied around a crawling baby, both are mannequins, and you know, doing all of these kinds of things. And I just like watched a snippet from Madonna's latest concert. I don't know if you've seen that. It is creepy as
Oh,
heck. The whole thing is a ritual. She starts out opening with reciting from the Bible, and then there's a part where like these people in these black hooded things and they're carrying this thing that look like I don't know what they're called, but yeah, they're carrying these things. I think like they would smoke something from them kind of thing. And then um carrying out this person who looks like they're a prisoner. And then there's like these dancers, these male dancers circling, and the way that they're dressed, they look like Jesus on the cross, and they're dancing in a way that looks like he's hanging, and like it's all very sadistic and inverted, and I'm looking and watching this like, what are people thinking watching this? Like, what do they think they're
Yeah, like who's
watching?
watching it? Like I don't
Who's
know.
like, it's messed up. And but like, so this is kind of how they're now doing it more out in the open. And if they're getting more and more people kind of just accepting, oh, and people, celebrities on stages dressing up as the devil, and the crowd thinking that's amazing. And like, this is just the level of like, their love has been so abused under the will of these power structures, these Satanists, that it's like now they're totally worshiping these people. Like, worship, oh my goodness, it is so. And there was a time where I was like, celebrity culture and, oh, how amazing and talented these people are, but
Mhm.
now I kind of feel sorry and pity for them, because I know that they're also have probably been
Mhm.
victims of mind control and abuse and trauma, and they're just doing exactly what they've been programmed to do. And you see these videos of these celebrities like kind of, I don't know, glitching or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean there is like there's I think that right now is a time where a lot of their stuff's glitching, and I think they've been really arrogant for a long time, and I think they really just haven't really dotted all their T's and I's, and like they're, you know what I mean? Like now there's so many people whose programming is breaking, and there's so many people coming forward, and there's so many people speaking truth and helping each other, and they can't hide it. Like they actually lost power, I think, by trying to come out into the open, because they actually probably had more power from in behind. But it's kind of like how a serial killer wants to be caught because he wants to be that infamous person in the trial and go down in history as this vile person. Like if somebody was just a serial killer and they never got caught, they never get to be famous. They never get their narcissistic, supply from the evil they've done. If nobody even knows it's them, they can't bask in the glory of their evil, right? And so
Mm.
these people have controlled stuff for a long time behind the scenes, but it's almost too easy for them. And they really want to be worshipped. They really want to be open, and they want to be open dictators, and they want to be openly worshipped. And so that's kind of their own narcissistic need to not just, control things from behind. They want the glory of like, we took over and we're the Satanists and we do what we want. And, that they're needing that so badly is what forced them to come out like cockroaches to the light. And it's kind of funny, like all the dark to light that everybody's saying right now, because I'm like, yeah, it's like literally like the dark people coming out to the light. Like it's not a transition from the dark to the light, like how, like when people say those kind of code words, like I'm like, no, it's like cockroaches coming out, like, and that's what they're trying to do. And it's like, but that wasn't that smart for them, because there's people that have eyes on them now, and they've exposed themselves, and there's just too much communication going on now. They can't stop it. So it's, there's just a lot going on right now on the planet.
Mm. Yeah, and it's so many. My brain just goes into like, oh, so many things I could talk about, ask, and directions I could go in. But so yeah, like one thing that I've been talking about a lot is that from the numerological side of things, we're in the 2020s, and that too represents that high level frequency of love. And I think, when we entered the 2000s, this is when they really started to kind of freak out, because that love frequency existing on the planet, that's a pretty unbeatable frequency. And I think from what you're sharing and what you're saying is like, this is them wanting to really like, for them, the opportunity is to use that frequency of love and
Mm.
invert it so that they are using that love for their will, right? But there are a lot
Mhm.
of people since the 2000s that have really started to wake up to this, because I think that two energy is pulling on people's hearts,
Mhm.
people's truths, people like, hang on a second, this actually doesn't feel right. What's going on? Let me have some questions here. And so there's a lot of people kind of waking up to this very rapidly now, because of course we're in the 2020s. So it's even that two energy is more magnified now. Where do you think they're at? Do you think they're still their whole power structures, whatever is still in place? Do you think, because a lot of people think that there's like the very tippy top of the epicenter, and then there's the power structures that are obvious in the world, like all the presidents and the blah blah blah, like that. There's like been some severing, and so now these people are kind of just throwing spaghetti at the walls because they actually don't have any top down influence. Or like, where do you think things are at? Where do you think things are now going?
I don't know. I'm still kind of waiting to see because I think there's still kind of that danger and opportunity like where it could go either way. And I think ultimately, ultimately they're not going to win. They might do some more damage, but the more damage they do, the more people are going to understand what they're doing and realize they can't actually ignore it or accept it. So like that's what I was saying about kind of staying behind the scenes. They can kind of low level micromanage everything to like a kind of a hell that sort of has a veneer over it, where we're still living in hell, but like it's still got some flowers on the top of it.
Mhm.
But now when they make it kind of this overt, obvious hell, that's when people are kind of like, I can kind of smell the crap now. Like it's the flowers aren't really working anymore. And so they're going to want to do something about that crap. They can't just live with it. Right. So
Mm.
like the more they expose out this horribleness, it's like, I don't know. Like in my opinion, humanity is going to get exactly the amount that they need to do what they need to do. So that's why it's so important, like I think, to read and research and even look at the really dark stuff, because otherwise you're going to learn it the hard way later. And like it's better to be proactive and just face what is now.
Mm.
Like, and we look at World War II, where some serious stuff happened with a lot of people. Like some serious evil arose and did a lot of harm to a lot of people, and a lot of people got sucked in and deceived. And again, that love under will, like there's a lot of people that thought they were doing good, that were part of evil. And people seem to forget quite easily, like that wasn't even that long ago. Like a lot of those people are even still alive, or their kids are still alive. Like, and so that serpent rearing its head again is like already happening. And so if people don't really get the lesson, it's going to keep happening. And if that takes for people to literally be in concentration camps, which I mean, there was some stuff happening like that during COVID, like where people were locked in hotels and locked on cruise ships and locked up and, like even locked in their houses. Like, so, I mean, you should take whatever the universe gives you as a little taste and a little whisper and take that pretty serious, because it will keep increasing and it's going to be the exact amount you need before you figure it out. So if humans really need to have like an all-out chaos episode where like total carnage comes upon the earth before people say, this isn't really good for anybody, and why are we doing this? Like that's kind of what happened in World War II, right? Like it got to a certain level where humanity was like, we'd rather die than live like this, and so we're going to fight, and we're never going to let that happen again. Although we're letting it happen again, right? Because people forget, and so that's going to happen. Like that's always available to happen until people figure it out. But that's what I'm saying. Like they could have kept it's kind of like an abusive relationship where somebody might stay, if they're just getting, some abuse some of the time, there's some good things, they might stay in that relationship, right? But when the person starts getting worse and worse and worse, they actually get to a point where they're like, now I got to break up with this person, right?
Yeah.
So, so these people kind of coming out and making things really horrible and really worse, it's really just giving humanity the opportunity to say like, can we live this way? And people are fearful and they're choosing security, and they're like, well, if I suffer a little bit now, I'll get to stay safe. And it just doesn't work that way. So like, I mean, I don't know. I can't say what's going to happen. There's so many variables, and it is kind of a quantum percentage of people that will figure it out. There's so many people figuring it out, but then there's so many people that are clinging more to denial and want more control and more like they want slavery, because they think slavery is safe and easy. And the universe doesn't like slavery. It only uses slavery to contrast and temper freedom. So if people keep choosing that, it's gonna backfire, and it's gonna take whatever it's gonna take to get to that freedom again, which may be a lot of pain and suffering. It really depends on what people want. So I don't know. I honestly can't say. Like I'm not convinced. I don't have an accurate number of where I think that level is going to be, because I meet really awake people and I see so many people waking up, especially like I said, I've known about a lot of stuff since like about 2008. And so I used to feel so isolated, like nobody just, it seemed like I was on like a bad episode of Pleasantville or something, where I'm like, how can no one else see all this, you know? And now, like, so many people are seeing it that I'm like, okay, like, this is good. There's, but then, you know, something that was revealed to me during COVID was I actually was giving people a lot more credit. Like it was really revealed the true character of people, the true selfishness, the true fearfulness, that, how they would be out for themselves and not willing to fight. And, like, I guess I really overestimated where I thought a lot of people were at. And when
Mm,
that was exposed during COVID, that was kind of the hardest part for me. Was like, oh, wow, like people are really easily cowards for so little. Like that really scared me. But I mean, yeah, I honestly, I can't make an estimate. I don't know. I know we're going to get there eventually. I don't know how bad it's going to be before people get it.
mm. And I really appreciate that you're like, I'm not convinced yet, and I think that's a really like safe place to kind of be. And I use that word kind of lightly because in the sense that, you know, if we think like we want to be like, we've already won and the war's already over and all of this kind of stuff, but we also don't want to go into the space of complacency and think, oh, there's no work to
Mm-hmm.
be done. And, because there is a lot of work to be done, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think the most like revolutionary act a single human being can do as like for as their part in this whole bringing this whole thing down or towards freedom? What do you think like is yeah.
I think it's pretty revolutionary to use your own free will. Like honestly, like so many people just like look outside themselves like what should I be doing? What am I allowed to do? What is socially acceptable to do? What is within my right to, and everybody's also trying to control everybody else,
Mm,
which is such an illusion anyways. Like you can attempt to influence people, but like you really can't go and force like it's just we're not in that game right now. Like everybody has a will, and it is a quantum it's a matter of numbers, right? Like, and so if people
mm,
could figure that out and stop wasting all their time trying to control everything around them, and actually really use your free will, like in every little instance. And I know it got really scary during COVID because you're like, well, like, how am I going to get my groceries, or how am I, like, and so, there's that pressure to not use your will. And like, it's like that Viktor Frankl book, right? Like it's like, there's always that little opportunity for your will in each instance. And sometimes that can be a really small little gap that you have will, right? But you
mm,
always have some type of little will. And, it's like, that's something like I've had to struggle with too. And there may be really bad consequences. Like I've tried to be a principle based person in my life, and, to the point of being irrational, where like people who know me are like, Jaymee, you have the most integrity of everyone I've met, but like you just don't even make sense sometimes because like you're getting so much kickback and suffering. And like, why don't you just do something where you're not getting like so persecuted for like doing what you're, and I'm like, I feel like that's kind of the game we're in. Like, I feel like that's kind of the game. And like, it's okay, because to me, the worst thing is compromising your integrity. Like that feels like losing to me instantly, which is the
mm,
opposite of these people, like these Satanists who are like, I don't really care what I do as long as I win, right? That's like a transgender person going in a boxing match and beating up a woman because they put implants on their chest and then they get the gold medal. They only care that they got the medal. Like they don't realize, like, whereas somebody else would say, like, I would never, like, if I had to do that to win the medal, I wouldn't do that, right? Like, and so that's really the difference, I think, of the game we're in, is to use your will in every instance to
mm,
choose what you really want to do, right? And not let other people manipulate you and control you, which can be hard. It can be hard. If a police comes to your house with a taser on you, like it's going to be really hard to use your free will because you're going to be scared. And you know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's like, but I always say it's like quicksand. Like the more you give it up, the less you have, and the more you wiggle to try and avoid it, you're just sinking deeper, and then it's even harder to use your will later, right? And so, like, really, really, really holding on to whatever choice you have to do what you think is actually right and true in each situation, not what you think you should do. And I think that's one of the battles we're in right now. Like something I've noticed even with the older generation, like the baby boomers, like they're so conditioned that to go along is to get along and to conform and to be part of the group and to be accepted is like such a social value like that, and it's like we need the rebellious spirit right now, right? Like true rebels is to say like, you know what, like I don't agree. I don't agree. And I'm just going to control me and I'm not going to go along with that. And I really don't care what anybody thinks or what the consequence is. And there is real consequences. Like anybody who knows me, I could write a whole book on the consequences. Like it's not for the faint of heart because it's going to cost you a lot. It's not going to be, I wouldn't change it though. I really wouldn't. Like I've had a lot of stuff come on me from trying to do principle-based stuff. And it's been really rough sometimes, but like I do not regret it. I honestly feel like at the end of life, we are going to go back and review and be like, oh, I wish I didn't compromise there. Like, because it's such an illusion that stress being put on you to compromise, right? And all this COVID stuff was such a mind game about that, right? Like half of the stuff wasn't even real. Like they were just, people were so scared of what might happen that they were compromising before the actual thing was even happening, right?
That is so powerful, Jaymee. And I think it takes to, like, it's so wild to think that one of the most revolutionary things you can do is actually use your free will. Like, that's wild in itself because in the ideal scenario, that's just what we do. We just use our free will every day, very easily, very simply. Like, it's just, but to get to that point in this day and age with what we are contended with there's a lot of work you got to do potentially to get to that point of actually, because part of the process, in my opinion, of doing things from true free will is understanding how much you do that is not from free will. That is a lot to kind of face.
We've been conditioned to believe we need permission for all these things we don't need permission for. And yeah, to actually even know what your will is, right? Like it's so many people don't even know what their will is anymore. It's
yeah, because it's all been manipulated, right? Under the love of someone else's will.
Yes. And so it's like I use like there's a few different examples, like, where like one of them is like abortion, right? So it's like like I truly believe that it goes against obviously the maternal drive and life force. And when people make that decision, it's not because they want to do it. It's because they have so many other factors of fear and like they feel so in a horrible situation that they're terrified to not do it. It's not like their true will where they're like, oh yeah, I want to do that. That's great. Right. Like nobody, they're doing it out of a reaction of like duress and stress and fear and all these things. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you see how they kind of manipulate that in women, like saying, oh, we're going to take away your right to do it. And we're like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's really instead of saying like, well, why would somebody want to do this? And how could we support them to be in tune with the natural order of things by supporting them in their true will, which I don't think it would be anybody's true will, right? Like it wouldn't be, right? Like it's always a reaction. It's not what they really wanted, right? But you can see how when they invert that and say, oh, well, we're going to take away your right and stuff, then people are like clawing at doors being like, give us our, but that's what they wanted the whole time, right? It wasn't like asking why are women feeling like they would have to do this. It's trying to make it seem like you're taking away their right choice, which is different, right? Like, but it's like, that's a really good example. And then they use all these weird terms to kind of make it seem like something is not. And then if anybody tries to say anything about it, they're like, oh, you're trying to like take away women's autonomy and stuff. And like, it's just completely different things, right? Like but I always think that's a really good example. Like when you see like these like raging women being like, it's my right. And it's like, yeah, you do have autonomy over your body. Absolutely. Nobody would ever argue that. But like the fact that they've taken something that somebody's doing out of a reaction of duress and making it seem like a privilege, it's not a privilege. Like it's actually really sad that somebody would feel they needed to do that, right? Like, and it's like
Mm.
taking away even the judgment of that. It's like just saying, why is this happening? Like, it's obviously because the woman doesn't feel that she can do it. It's not that she is like, it's going to be fun for her to go and have to go through this, right? Like, so it's
Yeah.
just changing the thinking around it. But you can see how people get full of rage about it, and like are like if they don't get one, they're somehow victimized by, like, it's just so inverted, right? Like but that's, one really good example. Same with like the euthanasia stuff, right? Like, it's my right to kill myself. Like, that one is just funny to me, right? Like, if there's anything I would not ask the government permission for, it would be to commit suicide. Like, that is just like the fact that they've conditioned people to have to go ask permission from the government is, that is actually just, it is laughable to me, just because it's so ridiculous,
I
right?
mean, if you
That
don't
like
laugh, then
somebody
you would be rocking in a corner, right? But
I just
like
can't
it's
believe that
so,
people think they have to go ask the government permission, and that they'd be in trouble if they did it with, like that's just, another example of how they're harnessing, where then when people get angry about their right to do things, is because their will has been harnessed, their love of like their autonomy and their free will and their right to choose and their choices and all these really good things has been harnessed into them demanding the thing that is happening to them out of trauma, right?
mm,
Like, they're demanding their own trauma, demanding it, not even asking for it. And I always wondered why they didn't do that with the vaccine too. Like, or people were just clawing, demanding it, right? Because if they, like, what they really should have done is been like, oh, it's only for the elite, you can't have it, and then people would be like, give us the vaccine, like, the fact they tried to force it on people isn't going to work, right?
mm.
Got to be the opposite, right? Where they're trying to take away your right to get it, and then people would have been fighting over it,
And it's just so like, I mean, you see it so clear as day now when you explain it like this, and it's just like, you know, it doesn't matter whether the bill gets passed or not. What matters is that these people who are just interested in power and control are keeping the heart workers busy. You know,
Yeah.
that's all that matters. And so let's like create these small little things along the way, to keep them feeling like they have some kind of control, or they can, they can really do something. But this just comes from such a top level that it's really like they're just playing a game, and then there's the chess pieces, and let's move it to here, and yeah, that's going to cause some writing, but that's good because they're going to be distracted, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're going to, but if it goes one way or the other, it's one side is going to feel like they really accomplished something, and the other side is going to still have fire in their belly to keep fighting. So they're still distracted. And it's just on and on and on and on it goes, and it's, yeah, like things like that, like abortion or euthanasia, they're such triggering topics that
Mm-hmm.
people are so viscerally one way or so viscerally the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just another way to cause that division. And it's everywhere though. It's everywhere, whether it's the topic of abortion, or if it's what religion, or what sports team, or what
Mm-hmm.
celebrity, or ballet over hip hop dance, or this music versus that music. There's always an opportunity in society to pick a side and be like, this is my side. And if you don't, so it's just, and it's all top down control. All of it is like human beings need to invest their heart, their love into something they feel like is going to make a really big difference, because human beings have such a natural nature of love. But that is
Mm-hmm.
we just keep coming back to the love, how it just,
Really true. It's really true. And even like if you go to your arch enemy, like if you really reduce down, they believe they're coming from love too, right? And that's why these Satanists laugh, because they say there is no right and wrong. There's only weak and strong. There's only power and control. So like, it's like people always believe they're right and acting out of love. Even the Satanists, in their own way, believe they are. Like it's so crazy. And so that's why it's so important to understand objective morality is embedded in the universe. Like there is right and wrong in the universe, like And one of the main things of right and wrong is to respect the autonomy of individuals and not force your will on them, because we have free will, right? So, I mean, I know a lot of people have a lot of ideas of what right and wrong is, but it's really like we actually all have the same rights. Like, and that's what the Satanists are always trying to say. Oh, there's a hierarchy, and some people can do stuff that other people can't. It's like, no, in the creation that we're all a part of, we all have free will. We all have a body. We all own our own body. We all don't have the right to go and take over anybody else's body or anybody else's thoughts or anybody else's will. That's really a really basic level of freedom that was given to each person in the universe. So like anything that's trying to manipulate that and destroy that or take it from others is wrong. And it doesn't matter what type of social constructivism you arrange around that. It's never going to be okay, but they can always construct things that make it seem okay, but it never will be. It's just inherent and it's subjective and has nothing to do with how you look at it. And so yeah, a lot of stuff just comes down to them really construing things so that you can't tell the difference between right and wrong anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I'm reminded of some stories that some survivors have shared with me and have shared over the course of their speaking out. And it's like given impossible options. Like they've been
Double
put under
binds.
they've been put under these experiments, and then it's like either like they have to choose who gets hurt. And so a lot of the time, the individual, the person that's going through it, the survivor, they've kind of figured out at some point that you can do anything to me, but what actually gets to them, to their human spirit and their human nature, is when they do something to someone else in front of them. A human being at their natural would always choose themselves before inflicting pain on another person, unless they're put in an absolutely impossible situation, and so that is just like what they're doing on such a big scale. And it's ugh, crazy.
Yeah, it's but it's like there is so much hope right now because like there are so many people that are starting to understand this, and it's becoming really common knowledge. We still have a ways to go. Like I said, I was pretty shocked. Like I thought people were a lot more conscious than what was revealed during COVID. Like I was like, oh wow, like I thought people were like at least in high school, but they're way down in elementary school. Like it was really, I was like, oh, that's kind of scary, right? And a lot of times, even still, like I'll be talking about stuff like it's common knowledge, and people are just looking at me. I'm like, oh, right. People, this isn't common knowledge. Like I forget that it's not, because there's so many people awake now.
Yeah.
Like when I talk to you, I know you understand me and don't think I'm crazy, and vice versa, right? Like, and there's so many people at this level now that are talking and communicating and helping to bring up the quantum field of everybody. So that's really where most of my hope is right now, is that there's just so many people that have even like accelerated learning, right? Like there's so many people that are just taking in so much information and learning, and so much has been exposed. And that's why I feel like part of my calling is even just to take in information, like just so that it's somewhere in the consciousness of the quantum field, because there's so much available now that if nobody's consuming it, it's just kind of floating around in the ether. Like it has to be put into human consciousness and like brought into the field of our mind field, right? So it's like all these people that are writing books, all the people that are putting out podcasts, all the people that are generating knowledge and putting it out, it's like it's also people's job to take it in, because it's raising up all the consciousness. And so like that's why they're always trying to distract us with really stupid, meaningless entertainment things, so that people aren't actually putting their consciousness on taking in the information. And if you think about the quantum leap since the internet, like people were really in ignorance. Like even our parents, like, you know what I mean? Like they had a couple channels, they had one newspaper, they trusted institutions and authorities, like, and now there's like, even like you don't even need as many professionals right now. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, like if you wanted to learn, like take counseling or psychology or something, like you had to pay hundreds of dollars even to access like some basic information, right? Whereas like now you can do so much self-therapy online. There's so many people sharing their stories. There's so many videos. You can watch university lectures online and you can see everything. You can read every book. Like everything's available if people want to expand their consciousness. And right now there's, the internet was such a huge leap in available information that it's actually been traumatic for a lot of people, because it's like, we weren't really supposed to have to learn this much in our life. Like, I mean, I always think about how much information I've taken in. I'm like, if I lived 100 years ago, I would have never had to have read this many books or know what's going on everywhere in the world all the time, every day, with everyone. It's a lot on our brain. Like, I feel like we don't even have enough gray matter in our brain to like hold all this huge amount of information that's available now. And so humanity's got to kind of like take it in and move up with it, right? And so it's a lot. It's like a heavy burden just to even expand right now, but we are definitely going somewhere better, like information and expansion of consciousness and truth coming through. Like, there's so much truth available now. Like, it's really going to just like on a quantum level, just lift up all of humanity. The more people that can get their mind closer up to the truth and reality.
I think that's a really great place to end our discussion today, which has just been such a phenomenal and important conversation. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time and taking a break from your gardening, which, after what you just explained, is absolutely vital and necessary, getting back to our basics as human beings and getting our fingers in the soil and just remembering that, yeah, like, this is who I am. This is what I am, So just thank you so, 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 so much. And if, you're someone who's listening to this and this is kind of, you're new to hearing this information, I firstly just want to acknowledge you for actually taking the time to listen and to take this information in. Be gentle with yourself after listening to this conversation, because it's a roller coaster for anybody to hear. It doesn't matter if you have been knowing this stuff for a long time. It's never easy to listen to. But also, the message I really think is taking back our own sovereignty, taking back our own free will, taking back, like, doing the work to really piece the fragments of yourself back together. That for me is so revolutionary, because the more whole we each are, the harder we are to manipulate and to program. And it's the most powerful way that you can protect yourself and protect your family, of course. So yeah, just thank you so, so, so much, Jaymee, for being here. Really appreciate you. And you just have so much vast knowledge and wisdom, and it's just incredible. So is there anywhere that you want people to look? Because I know that you've done a lot of interviews that you've done.
I'm still working on that. I really am going to get my own webpage and stuff. I just, I'm just not ready. I'm really not. Like, I keep almost doing it, and then I'm like, no, I'm just not ready. I just kind of, if people just Google Jaymee Jay, they can find, there's honestly probably like 60 podcasts out there I've done on other people's shows, and I'm around. You can find me. It's just, I haven't really set up my own stuff, and I do want to set up like just more of a structured thing for myself, but I'm just not there yet. I'm just not sure exactly how I want to do it and what my kind of image is going to be that I'm going to present it as, like, because I'm kind of, like I said, I'm kind of like a generalist and I'm all over the place, and I'm like, okay, I kind of need to like just make like one page that's kind of like a focused, thing that's a specific, has a specific energy to it and is going to go with a certain thing, and the theme and stuff. So yeah, still working on that. I did just want to give a quick shout out about these books by Laura Worley, because and I know you're going to have her on your show soon, but I just wanted to show these two books to people because these actually are really, really current books that have to do with satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra, and programming. And these books, I really want everyone to read these books because the stuff in these books is different than any other books. Like, Laura has a whole bunch of the new, it's not new, it's new information coming out about different types of programmings that have been done. And so anybody working with survivors of SRA really needs to educate themselves with these books, because there's just like a lot of the stuff that's out there is really old and dated, and it's just not, you're going to kind of go in some circles unless you kind of get some of the more current stuff, which Laura's done a really, really good job of writing these books with a lot of current stuff in it that, so yeah, I've just been kind of like trying to get people to really, really look at these books, because I think she's pretty shadow banned, and like these just like, please get these books and read them. Like, it's really, really gonna help people. And the Spally book too is another one that just came out that's like really, really good. So anybody that's studying this stuff, it's like a really good place for them to start is with those books.
It's amazing. And I would love to add links to those books in the show notes. So I'm sure you can just find them on Amazon and stuff like that.
Yeah, they are on Amazon. All of these books are on Amazon. But these two ladies just have both really been through a lot and have actually, they're both really intelligent and have like put together some really important information that's like really critical. They've both done really amazing job of writing it out, which I'm so thankful for them to even be able to do this. Like, it's not just trauma stories. It's like very specific in the programming and what they're doing. It's like very, very important information to get out. So I'm just really trying to promote this to get out because it's really, again, it's this new information coming into the quantum field of, you know, like, I feel like God's already like woken up so many people and allowed so many people to come out and talk and connect. And now there's like this, you know, people are presenting like new information that's going to come in that's really going to help all the people working on it. And it's like just really important to share this information and get it into the psyche and into the collective consciousness so we can just keep moving forward out through this stuff. And I believe we are going to. Like I said, I don't know how long that's going to take or how much suffering it's going to take, but we are moving through it and we are overcoming it and we are going to do it. And there's like just more and more people are getting involved and it's going to happen no matter what. It's just like the more we can do to be proactive, I believe the less suffering we're going to have to learn through. So
100%.
Get some books, everyone.
Get the books. And, you know, if someone's been shadow banned, then that's where you want to look.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Get a puppy too.
And get a puppy. Yes.